All right, everybody, what's up? Today is the AMA with Steven, and we're going to do a live reaction to the answers he gives. Let's see if we learn anything interesting.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to an awesome stream. I am super excited because we're going to be doing one of my favorite things ever, which is an AMA. And I am joined by four of our absolute glorious content creators within the Ashes of Creation community, many of whom you have probably seen before if you are regulars in the community watching all things that are Ashes of Creation content. And let's just do some introductions because I'm excited to get into this. Obviously, we have, as I said, our four glorious content creators. Vladis, welcome, Vladis.
Oh my God. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Steven. It's a pleasure.
I love your hat, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I love it. And that's merch, actually. Don't you sell that?
Yes. Yes,
That
I
is
do.
that is
Definitely
super cool.
inspired by early Intrepid for sure.
We got some weird looks when we had that in Seattle one year, let me tell you. But it was a great conversation starter.
Absolutely.
And then we also have our glorious Jamie Chaos. Jamie Chaos, how's it going, buddy?
Not bad. I'm actually really happy to be doing this on your end instead of being surprised that it's happening on my end. So I'm super pumped to be here and doing it this way.
You mean you're not crashing the live stream like I
No.
did to you one time? That that was a lot of fun actually. For those of you guys who don't know, I was watching one Sunday Jamie Chaos's stream, and they were talking about an interesting subject, and I just jumped in. I was like, you know what, I want to join. Let me come on the show. And it was an impromptu, and I got to say, you handled it really well. Like,
Thanks. I ended up cutting like 10 minutes of footage on the YouTube version of that, so no one saw me fumbling trying to get you on.
well, that's, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. And then we also have one of my favorites from Loreforge, Sunny. How you doing, buddy?
I'm just so excited to be here. This is gonna be a riot. I've got the other two guys under my desk. They're yelling questions at me, so it's just me on the camera, but they're here in spirit.
Under his
I gotta
desk,
tell
huh?
you guys at Loreforge, it is definitely a highlight of mine when you guys come out with some lore videos. One, because obviously, you're giving these lore videos as you're peeking through the keyhole, so to speak, and it's always so interesting to kind of hear the takes that you guys put it. And one other thing is, like, the quality is just so good for what you guys are doing, and I share it throughout the office. Our narrative team, our lore team, they watch
If
it, they
only
love
Twitch's
it.
streaming quality was
Anytime
that
there's a
good.
new video, so kudos to you guys. You do a great job with that.
Well, thank you so much. I think that those guys are not ever going to forget that you just said that. But we've been doing it for a long time and just gradually got better gear. So if you would have seen us 10 years ago, we might not have been having this conversation.
Well, you guys do a great job.
Thank
And
you
then
very much.
last but of course not least, we have Nice Gaming. Nice, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you? Really, really happy to be here.
You know what, Nice, I got to tell you, your name is so appropriate because always, whenever I'm watching your either recaps or your theory crafting videos, you are just generally always freaking nice. You got this huge smile. It's an inviting presence, and it's a positive thing that I think is a great testament to the content creation of this community. You do such a great job on that.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Ironically, I think Nice
Well,
is actually into
I know that you
PvP.
guys have been getting together some questions from the community. Some of you guys had little interactions with the communities to kind of vote for questions, I think, along the way. And you guys obviously have your own questions, and I'm excited to chat about them. Obviously, I love a conversation. I'm also a pincushion for questions too, so I don't mind that. But wherever you guys want to take this, wherever you want to start, I am open to chat.
All right. Well, I would love to talk aliens with you, Steven. Seriously.
Oh my gosh,
But
can we talk
just-
aliens?
Oh my God, I would love to talk aliens.
Yes, let's talk aliens.
Just to give you away from Ashes, but again, this would be Ashes questions. But okay, to preface, guilds, the backbone of the entire Ashes community, right? Alliances and so forth. You were a
Yes.
guild leader in Lineage. So
Yes.
guilds are a very important feature in Ashes of Creation. So my first question is, can you give some examples of guild tools that are going to be in Ashes of Creation from a player data
Sure.
perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I so little fun history. I started I started playing MMOs obviously when I was really young, 7 years old. I didn't have a guild then. That would probably have been concerning if I was in a guild as a 7-year-old, considering the content typically that exists within the guild atmosphere. But when I was 17 and started playing Lineage 2, my first guild that I ever joined was called
I'm trying to figure out how
Darkness.
old he
I
is
was a
based
little
off
bit
of
of an
this.
edgelord back then. So I was in a guild
Does that mean
called
he's
Darkness,
younger than
and then
me?
I started my guild, which I ran for a number of years. I think almost 14 or 15 years,
Oh,
and
wow.
we had thousands of members across the
Hmm.
world. And we would have really cool guild meetings. We would meet up in person. We had like a really intense guild DKP system where I had like engineers custom author an auction website that people had account services on in the guild, and they would get like, DKP points and stuff. And I always hated having to kind of do that myself, right? I always wished that some of the tools that I wanted to use as a guild leader were not like native to the
Spreadsheets.
game system that I was involved in, especially if I was able to like slurp data from the game and inform decisions, whether it be participatory data, whether it be like kill counts for a war, or like just different things that I would use essentially to kind of gauge how are my members performing, right? And how can I leverage administrative tools to message them either offline, like an SMS text system, or the forum connectivity, or know what their kind of like playtimes might be if they want to share those with me, so that I can cater them to certain groups and constant parties and mix and match people, like those types of layers of like tools are what I'm trying to achieve with Ashes, and having
Wow.
it be native to the game. And obviously, everyone here at the studio are gamers themselves. They're playing MMOs, many of which I've either have led guilds or been officers in guilds. Um, and so that resonates with them as well. And I know on our UI side, Grat, who's our lead UI engineer, and Colby, who's our lead UI UX designer, they are both very in tune with delivering on that promise, which is to give native tools, at least at a bare minimum, above and beyond what other MMOs we've experienced give, as an out of the box solution for guild leaders.
Can you give like a couple of examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of those is going to be able to kind of message guild members offline, either through integrating SMS text as an option if people want to subscribe to that feature, being connected to forums so that people have an opportunity to kind of message board within the guild windows of the game, and then they can see the kind of message of the day. They can see the forums through that window. Another thing that we want to do is provide data around player performance in events that the guild is participating in, or that guild wars might be participating in, giving knowledge about where they might have their properties located within the game, where they may have their freeholds located within the game, what members of families they might be participated in. Those types of informations is what I think is beneficial for us as guild leaders.
So
to
the
kind of have
location
insight
data
to
is kind of
and cater the
interesting.
experience of the member in the guild to what their playtime and activity is.
Not sure what kind of stats it's going to track in Guild Wars, though, like their KDA or.
All right, so I've got some system heavy questions. So this first one is going to be
Well,
about the
that's
story
fine.
arc system. We haven't really received much information on how it will accommodate players of varying levels or its level accessibility. Are the story arcs designed to engage players of all levels simultaneously, or certain segments specifically tailored for high-end or end-game content?
Well, this is a good
It
question.
kind of depends on the story arc. We have story arcs that do both. We have story arcs that are catered towards high-end, high-end level ranges, that are very specific to the types of adventuring levels that we want players to participate in that story arc. And then we have some story arcs that have different sections which cater to a broader diversity of level ranges. And the way we kind of approach players participating in those more broader story arcs is that the activities of the lower level players feed up through the story arc. So what they're doing influences even what higher level players are able to do. And kind of meeting the certain quota of objectives.
So kind of
that are
like the way they
necessary
have
to
their
progress the story arc
crafting system where
requires
they can feed
participation down the line,
low-level stuff
across
into the
story
system, and
arc,
then it kind of goes up the chain. But for story
so to answer your
progress,
question shortly, we have both.
Okay.
It just kind of depends on the story arc.
All right, I guess I'll go next. With most dungeons and POIs being non-instanced, how large and intricate can we expect dungeons to be in order to accommodate many groups and PVX potential? For
Yeah.
example, how many players do you expect the Tower of Carfin to accommodate?
That's a great question.
Good question.
Let me break that up into two sections. First, it's important to note that while the vast majority of our playable areas are within the open world, there are some that are contained obviously within instances. Those instances being either individual instances, party instances, or even in some certain cases, raid instances.
Hey, Ren, welcome
With
to
that
the
being
stream.
said, however, part of the dynamic
I
that
haven't gotten any really
PVX
spicy
wants
questions
to-
yet, but
to
some good
emphasize
answers.
when it comes to open world dungeons and playable spaces is the natural friction that occurs when scarcity is a real thing. And scarcity means that not all hunting areas are going to be the same quality. They're going to be specific loot tables that are relevant to certain hunting areas. There's going to be certain spawn rates that is relative to experience values for those areas. And there's going to be different compositions of mobs that are relevant to the areas as well. And so because there are these kind of tiers of quality of hunting grounds, that creates a rarity value essentially to those locations, of which then there is a level of scarcity because there's limited space. So we are going to be creating spaces that are very large, to answer the first part of your questions, that will host many groups, right? And we're also going to have spaces that are relatively small and might only be able to cater to one or two groups.
So he's talking about high value
Second part of your
camps,
question, as
kind of
it
like an
relates
old
to
school
Carfin.
MMOs where you had a rare mob
Carfin
that
is
dropped
broken
something that
up
everybody
as a
wants.
hunting area into two primary
Like say
sections.
Myconids
There
and
is the tower
EverQuest,
itself,
Fungi
and then
Tunic,
there
that kind
is
of
the
thing.
wreckage of the city in which Carfin existed.
But more
Beneath.
materials than dropped
Now,
items.
the beneath section is the wreckage itself is generally catering towards groups of 3 to 5 players, right? So it's not so much a solo area, but it is an area where you might go with a few friends. But if you went with a full party, then maybe your kill rate needs to be really high, and there's a few sections that are in the wreckage area that could support that, but not the entire wreckage, right?
Okay.
So that's an important distinction to keep in mind. When thinking about the dungeon itself, the tower is intended for full parties. And there are, I believe, 6 levels. There are 5 levels above the base level, so 6 total levels that are playable, and each of those levels will support anywhere from 3 to 4 groups, essentially. So it is a relatively large structure.
So you're talking like
of
100 to
a
120
dungeon
people
that
in
we're
the
expecting
tower plus
groups
the
to spend
surrounding
a lot
area,
of time.
probably.
Awesome.
That's pretty good.
And
Since
it's
that's
not
just
intended
one
that the
dungeon
groups
for
go
one
between
node.
levels, right? It's intended kind of like they find a level and they carve out a section of that level that they're going to be hunting in.
Nice.
And then another group's going to be near them, and maybe there's going to be some friction because they keep pulling mob from your section, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Hey, what the hell, dude?
They're gonna
the
get
hell out of my
killed if they
section."
take my mobs.
And they're
Yeah.
like, "No, you're going to die now." You know, like I don't know.
Yeah, he's
Something
talking
might
about like
happen there.
specifically the instance I asked him about was not
Very
instance,
cool.
but
Well, it
you
looks
know,
like I'm
Tower
going
of
to go
Carfin.
now. I am from Loreforged, so
So
you
he's
know that
talking
I'm
about,
going to
like,
try to cram in a few lore-based
how
questions.
many people can you
Here we go.
accommodate
Here
in
we
these
go.
open world
All right.
dungeons? So he
So,
said like 3 to
By
4
the
groups
time
of
the portals
5.
reopen, the
plus
Tolnar have been down there for an awfully long time.
per floor.
So are they thriving or are they just surviving?
6 floors.
How much civilization
area
are the
outside in the
Tolnar
wreckage.
building underground?
That is a great question. So one thing I want to talk a little bit about with regards to the
Tolnar lore.
Tolnar culture is that they are not a super centralized nation. They're not a super centralized like civilization.
Is it like a
right?
tribal thing?
They're relatively tribe-like,
They-
city-state-like, even at some of the higher points when it comes to their factions, right? And
Mhm.
having spent a significant amount of time in a indiscriminate amount of time at this stage, you may learn more about that as you get into Vera, but having spent an amount of time in the Underrealms, um, those factions sometimes can be at odds with each other, right? And not, not all Talnar are going to be friendly to the other divine races or even to each other because of that. Um,
Interesting.
so there's still some rivalry between those groups. Um, Now, when we talk about what is the apex of like civilization that some of those tribes have accomplished, some of them have accomplished some pretty significant construction and development in the underrealm. So much so where you have a metropolis-sized location in the underrealm for the Tolnar. So that's not something that's going to be present obviously at the start of Alpha 2, but it is an intended
Confirmed. That's not the start of Alpha
location
2.
where you can see really the Tolnar civilization and their culture.
Very cool.
So
Thank
probably
you.
like full like
Yeah.
temples and dungeons and things, Tolnar based
All right, I guess I'm up
underground.
next. So, can you explain the philosophy on why there is a singular option for tank main players or healer main players at the archetype selection screen? And how much customization will there be in the base kit and augment system to truly make these different play styles?
Well, let me make sure I understand the first part of the question. So you're saying, why is there a single option for healer and tank?
Yes.
I see.
And can we get
Um,
the tank name changed?
Please, please.
I think we did a poll on that in the community at some point a few years ago, didn't we? And I don't know how that poll turned out. Somebody should dig that up if you're watching in the
It is
audience.
kind of a
see if
goofy
we can
name.
Find that poll somewhere in the Ashes Reddit. I'd be curious to see what the sentiment was there. But to answer your question, let's start with the second half of that question. When it comes to diversity, I think that you're going to have a wide range of diversity that's afforded through the secondary archetype system. That is intended to really flirt with the line of what a main role tank or main role healer is, and provide some more hybridized gameplay for those particular roles. That comes in a number of different forms. We've talked a little bit about, obviously in the past, how augments are intended to work with primary active abilities, and it is because the tank role and the cleric role are only afforded two of the archetypes that some of the most interesting, in my opinion, options of hybridization are going to come from those secondary choices with the tank and the healer. So you're going to get a broad diversity of
Hopefully he
of
clarifies that.
gameplay options there. When it comes to the role specifically, and why
Nope.
we're servicing those two roles with just two base archetypes, those are really critical, unique roles on a per party basis, right? When we talk about party comp,
So what interesting
generally it
hybridization.
is a traditional wheel of MMORPG game design that when talking about the trinity of gameplay roles, that you expect to have one tank and one primary healer in a party design, right? And we wanted to stay true to that, obviously. And those roles do have a significant impact on general gameplay loop when we're talking about moment-to-moment combat, right? Between the tank controlling the battlefield, being able to take hate off of other players, being able to maintain, aggro status with the predominant threat source. That is a role that we don't necessarily want to build in another archetype to kind of compete with. The cleric itself, however, is also integral. Now, that's not to say that we do not have some influences. The fighter has the ability to kind of off tank, especially depending on. And the reason I say that is because when we're talking about just from a base stat perspective, like con for a fighter is going to be high generally at a base value. Their ability
So he's
to
saying
kind of
fighters are going to be
absorb
kind of
hits is going to
inherently
be greater
tanky.
because of their suite of ability selections that they have available to them. So there are some other roles that do touch the line a bit in that divide of DPS to tank role. And on the healer side, the Bard has some regenerative abilities that they can
Oh.
utilize. Now, when they choose then to spec as a secondary class option into cleric or tank if you're a fighter or a bard, you're going to get much closer to those
Yeah.
roles, right? And I think having an off tank is an interesting.
What does closer mean, though? Can I heal like 80% of what a cleric can heal as a bard with a cleric secondary?
That we want to preserve space
Or
for.
60?
So the focus is really to kind of, stay true to what we expect from an MMO perspective with regards to those roles and group composition. We feel that the current class design achieves that, and we're going to allow players to flirt with what hybridization looks like for those roles through our secondary archetype options.
And just to clarify,
Yeah.
because the fear for me that a lot of people have told me is they're afraid from 1 to 25 that you're just going to get one style of gameplay. Like for the cleric, you're just going to be a holy priest from WoW. So as in the base kit, is there going to be any way to play differently from 1 to 25?
Yeah,
I mean, you could level as
I
a
think that
DPS
what we're trying
cleric.
to achieve in the base kit offering for those two roles, and you may have seen this already with the cleric, class live streams that we've done.
Yeah, for sure, not as
There
high
are
as the
some
main
offensive
cleric.
options there, right? And you could spec more offensively as a cleric than you would necessarily into
Yeah,
the support.
this is what I was talking
The
about.
same
Like,
is true on the tank side.
put all your points into your
ability
nukes
to
and stuff,
kind
and
of, customize your build options.
just DPS
You
into
don't,
your
you're
25
not
and start doing
pigeonholed
dungeons or
into
something.
specifically that role. You have hybrid options just from a base kit perspective.
And then specking to say like mage or something afterward and do even more damage.
Piggybacking on the tank name thing, if we go Guardian, you can go Guardian, Juggernaut, and who doesn't want to be a Juggernaut?
A Juggernaut. I can't remember what we were saying, but when Combat was working on the fighter, how often I heard in the playtesting somebody say, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!" It's like, oh my god.
He's
Straight
talking
out
about
of
the
the
That's
momentum
exactly what I
mechanic,
had.
yeah, for fighter. Makes you
Okay,
tanky as you do stuff.
From our understanding, the land management system in Ashes leads to environmental consequences due to overharvesting.
Ooh,
With
land
the
management.
elimination of the enemy of the state feature, what mechanisms are available for node citizens to manage or counteract situations where a group of non-combatants intentionally depletes resources from an enemy node, given the significant
Yeah, I wanted
downsides
to know the answer to
associated with
this
becoming
one.
corrupt?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are options, right?
Because you used to be able to like kill on
You
site
have,
people from your node for doing this,
if
but now you
those
can't anymore.
individuals are part of a guild, you have guild war as an option, right? If they are part of another node as a citizen, you have node war, which is an option. The idea is, how do we allow moments of player friction to circulate through the
So
game
Steven's
systems?
answer is carpet
And
bombing.
what you're describing is a moment of player friction where
Kill everyone
resources
involved,
local
even
to
if they're
your
not.
node or your guild, location are being capitalized upon by people you don't know or don't want, and they are doing it in an aggressive manner to harm your ability to then interact with that environment after they leave. That is a reputation score. They are establishing a reputation score with you as another non-faction based player. And the way that that reputation score circulates through our game system, such as leveraging the potential for your guild now to be at hostility with them, right, is something we want to allow players to leverage. So there are answers in the guild war system, in the node war system, to respond to aggressive
Off with
actions
their heads,
like
yeah,
land
pretty much.
management abuse. However,
Some
let's
confused
say
newbie
the
starts
number of
gathering the
people
wrong
doing
thing and you
the
kill their
work
entire guild
are,
for it.
alts, and they are not in a guild.
Ain't no
and
kill like
they
overkill.
choose to be citizenless, right? The other thing that we want to keep in mind is that there are ways to improve land management scores. There are policies that you can take which improve that and counteract that. So, it is not just a zero sum proposition between somebody's griefing me and not. This now may direct the way that you choose to govern your node in response to those outside actors, right? This is again intended to engage the systems. So while you may not want to accrue the corruption debt dealing with these, these alts or whatever, right? You now may need to manage your node differently in order to compensate, right? Unless it is meaningful enough to you to PK those people and you go and do that. That's also an option.
So on the management side, would there ever be a potential policy that allows you to kind of make an area like, say, a forest a purple area, or is that something that's not being considered?
Oh, I like that
it's
idea.
it's something we have definitely spoken about in the past. There's advocates for it on the design team that are more bloodthirsty designers. However,
This is
generally,
our
I am guarded
forest.
against
Don't steal
that,
our trees, kind of
at
thing.
least as it stands for now. If we're talking like, Ashes of Creation, first expansion, number 2 or whatever.
Let me kill them,
And we
Steven.
want to introduce perhaps some of the mechanics of like, policies that do what you just described, like designate a zone as open PvP, or if we wanted to reintroduce the person non grata, approach as well. Like that, I think, is still in line with the PVX philosophy of the game. So I wouldn't rule it out at some point far in the future. But generally, I think we have a lot of bloodthirst in the game currently through the events that we have, through the flagging system that we have, through the open seas uh, um, flagging provisions that we've made. Like there is a heavy emphasis of PvP in the game, as it rightfully should have, because we are a PVX game, and our conceptually design philosophy is you build the world through PvE, you change it through PvP, right? Like those are the competing factors. I think where it stands now is sufficient.
Thank you.
All right. What stat or utility benefits will active block and active dodge give players, and what resource or cooldown are associated with them?
So the resource is going to be stamina. We are currently implementing, for the purposes of Alpha 2, a universal stamina system that all archetypes share. When it comes to active block, sprint, and dodge, those will be a part of a universal skill progression tree that players can choose to invest skill points into. And those skill
Interesting.
points will share with their
First we've heard of
active
this.
ability and passive ability skill points as well. So if they're going to divest themselves of further progress within their archetype in lieu of investing in the universal skill tree, they will have access to benefits that those universal skill tree progressions provide. And some of those benefits do include stat bonuses when utilizing those universal skills. Some of them include different types of effects that can only be granted the player through the universal skill tree as well, such as the ability to potentially parry an attack, or something along those lines. We'll be talking about the universal skill tree somewhere probably midsummer-ish timeframe or late summer-ish timeframe, because it's still actively being developed. But the idea is to have that be an additional knob of customization that influences the way your character plays.
Yeah, more knobs of
And
customization.
just as a small follow-up, do you plan on any archetypes specializing in those core combat skills better than others? Like, will the tank have
Yeah, like a
things in their tree
fighter
to
can sprint
be
faster
better
than
at
other
it?
people or some shit.
Because it's a universal progression tree, the intent
But it
is
sounds
to
like no.
provide interactions with all the archetypes. So it's
Perfect.
not going to be, specifically more beneficial for one archetype over the other. The intent is that each of the archetypes will have some synergy, interaction, benefit to their general kit identity through the universal skill tree, and that's a viable option for you.
Lovely. Thank
Right,
you.
but if you have like a melee and there's one for running faster or
Okay,
sprinting more or
so
something, you're gonna want it more than say
during the Alpha
mage.
2 fighter archetype preview, we at Loreforged loved the chanting of the Mukma Goblin
Yes.
Shaman as they were channeling their spells. So the question that came up for us was, can we infer from this that there is a possibility of discoverable dialects in Ashes of Creation?
Oh, nice, like
So
EverQuest,
first,
where you
I
could
just
change your
wanna say
language.
that audio team did a great job, obviously, with those
You could like
incantations that the goblins were
speak
citing.
like lizard man or fairy or
and
whatever.
One of the things that still sticks with me, and probably with many of you there in their community and you guys here, is the games we've played, the MMOs we've played. We can probably recall the most often said thing by an NPC or when we cast. And even like I'll be playing D&D, like tabletop D&D, and I'm going to roll my dice and I'll incant the spell chanting from the prophet in Lineage 2. I'll be like empowering desire, champagne, I'll throw the dice out. Um so, I think that it's obviously very important that we have
I don't think even I'm a
not
big enough
just
nerd to understand what
the
he just
audio
said.
component of that incantation, but memorable ones that we will hear often and associate when we hear, either the good times we've had in that game or the bad times or whatever, right? Um, so to answer your question, are there dialects? Right now, I will be honest with you. The incantations are relatively ad libbed, right? They're not being sourced currently from a comprehensive dialect library of like the languages that each of the cultures have. Long term, I would love to continue to flesh out the identity of our cultures through going down that path. But it's just not something we prioritize currently as a result of needing to develop the game. But I will say that Win has done a phenomenal job already in authoring some
So
great
Star Citizen has something like this. The
influences
two
and
major alien
themes for
races
the
have their own
sound types that
languages
even our minor
with like
factions have,
spoken and
so that
written
the audio
characters
team can
developed by like a
reference them
PhD linguist.
when authoring the sound effects for those creatures. And so that is something that, while it's not fully fleshed out, we do have references that Win has compiled for the major cultures and some of the minor cultures so far.
Very cool. Well, I'm sure Tolkien's grandkids are just kicking around somewhere. You could give them a call and see what they're up to. So,
By the way, I apologize. This for those of you out there, you've never seen me probably at my workstation. I'm actively on the development floor currently, and it's only because I joined this call 2 minutes before we went live, because it's been a very busy morning. But, but other than that, you do get to see now the development floor. This is the design section, so I am in the design area.
Okay, so this, Stephen, might be a very easy question to answer, and I hope it's a yes. Will there be any kind of a trial quest to test out all of the secondary archetypes before making a final decision when selecting your secondary archetype at level 25? A lot of players
Yeah.
are fearing that you get to level 25 and you just have to choose one and you're not going to be able to try like the other 7 to see what would vibe with you.
Got it. Well, first, I will say that we do intend to allow players to switch between secondary archetypes. We've talked about that in the past. So even if you do make a choice there, that is something that you can change. It won't be permanent. Your primary archetype you cannot change. Your secondary archetype you can. With that being said, we do not currently have designs that are intended to provide a preview period for players. You know, and maybe that's just more of an old school kind of thing. Um, I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of that, right? Giving players, preview, but it's not planned for at the moment. You just kind of you make your selection, you go and you do the quest, and that's your secondary archetype, and then there's a quest that you can take in order to change it around. So that's the current design intent.
Is the intent for changing it going to still be a long process?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, the intent is that there is some level of investment when you want to choose to change that class identity. Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
And just to
So,
be clear,
oh,
just to be clear, I just want to comment on why that is. Some people may say, well, that feels cumbersome, right? Like, let me play how I want to play, which to a degree I agree with. However, there is something to be said about making a choice and that choice having consequences. Consequences not always bad, positive, but it lends to establishing an identity and a reputation, right? Many times in older games that I've played, older MMOs, I will see a person's name and I will know that they are one of the server's best tanks, right? And I don't have to guess what build they're on that day, right? It's most likely they're a tank. They are a tank. Like they can't change that, right? that provides a different sense of community when you're on a server than just everyone can be anything at any time, right? And so, I want to try to replicate that by having the choices be more meaningful, um, and provide that identity.
Sounds great.
So Annie and I plan to have the Chaos and Lace Cartel, but we'll probably be like a smaller guild. So this one's focused around that.
Nice.
Smaller guilds can opt to enhance their passive skills as a strategic choice over increasing membership size. Could you elaborate on the passive skills available to smaller guilds and how they enable them to remain competitive?
Here we go.
against
Maybe some
larger
actual useful
guilds in
information.
various gameplay scenarios?
Yeah, and to be honest, like that is a delicate line to play with. Because what happens when you make those passive abilities too strong, then you create the meta of how guild structures should be on this game. And so it means that, if it's a zero sum choice between I either take the passives or I'm bad, it's like everyone's going to take the passive. So there has to be some complement between, why guilds want to have expansion options versus passives. And so passives will be delegated to certain groups within the guild, and the core groups will have stronger passive access. So when you first form a guild and you're level 0, you may have 30 guild slots available
Say
to
what?
you, right? And that's your core guild group. And you can move people in and out of that group because when you get expansion slots, they form separate groups in the guild structure. That might be a knight or a squadron group, right? Whatever you're going to want to call it, because you can customize it based on the guild. And then those groups will have access to certain types of passives. Some of the passive types will be horizontal, some will be vertical, and it will be dependent on where you as a guild member are placed within those groups. And the placement within those groups are determined by the guild administrators, right? And so guilds will then spend currency as well as skill points to invest in those passives for those particular groups. And so
So he's
what we
talking
wanna
about
do is we
sectioning
wanna
off the guild
maintain
into
the
different
strongest
pieces.
passives for the central groups
You could,
and
like,
allow it
do
to decrease in power going outward from there.
PvP passives for one
So
group, and then like
even guilds
crafting
that
ones for
select
other
to go
people.
expansionists still have some passive abilities that they can spec into. But the guilds that choose to stay smaller, they can concert their skill points towards
Onto
more
everybody.
central
Yeah.
groups, leveling up those passives to higher strengths. And those passive types are things like waterfall stat augments, crit rate, regen values, and then they can get a little bit more intricate with the types of effects that they have, like negating an attack, ability, a spell attack against you as a target every 30 seconds or
A
something.
passive spell shield.
It depends on kind of what we're talking about with the abilities. They are wide ranging,
Huh.
but the intent is for them to be impactful.
All right, cool. I think I might have actually got more people asking more questions than that it may have answered.
Yeah.
I think we all want to follow up.
All right. What is the intended time to kill in both 1v1 or group PvP scenarios? Will players in solo or outnumbered PvP scenarios have ways to defeat larger groups or punish them for stacking too close to each other?
Hey, that's 2 questions. Is that 2 questions?
Who's counting at this
Who's
point?
counting? Okay, wait. Okay, so what was the first question? The first question is, what is the intended TTK for 1v1s?
Yeah, or any PvP scenario, whether it's 1v1 or you can answer it separately, 1v1 or group PvP.
Okay, so right now, if I were to say average TTK between average leveled characters and same level characters and average gear score, I would say that we're probably talking anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds, upwards of 30 seconds, depending on the archetype, right?
Okay.
So
Okay, so not an
obviously the
instant
more
burst,
restorative,
but not like
archetypes, like a cleric or
5-minute
whatever, might
fight.
be able to last longer, or a tank might be able to
Yeah.
last longer. If they're facing another tank, or if they're facing another cleric, right, then it's going to be like a wiffle bat fest or something. And then if you're talking about 2
Could be good.
DPSs against each other,
That's gonna be
That's gonna
faster.
real
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
So I would say that's generally the intent. Now, what does that mean when talking about like group play? That means that if you are really organized in the way
Yeah,
that
proper
you
focus
have
fire, defensives with a group.
targeting and target assists,
Yeah.
and that you
Gonna be
call
super
raid
important.
calling, like there is opportunities there to have multiple DPSs take out a target real quick, right? And because of that type of precision gameplay, it really raises the skill ceiling when talking about organization and how players play with each other, right? Because now the room for error is smaller. And that is something that I think
Yeah, you don't want to be a squishy healer
is
and then wander up to the front line
important
accidentally
in
because you
any
don't remember where you're
competitive
standing.
style of game, which a PvX game is relatively competitive. So that's why we tend to go on the smaller TTK side. And then now, what was your second question?
So as far as like fighting outnumbered, like would players in a smaller group have a chance to fight a larger group? Like, are there going to be AOEs that do more damage based on how many people are within this proximity? Ways to combat larger groups and not just let sheer numbers like determine the.
He's
victory?
talking about like anti-Zerg
Well, okay.
mechanics.
That's so somewhat connected, right? Because if we're talking about smaller TTK numbers, then the room for error being less, that means that you can have a scenario where a larger group, and by definition a Zerg, which is less organized, less skilled players, but are numbers over skill, there is now a better opportunity for the smaller group to prevail against the larger group if they are better organized and more skillful, which tends to
So
be
what
the
he's
case
saying
in
is
smaller
get
groups,
good.
right? So intrinsically, those two philosophies are tied to one another, right? The shorter TTK and the how do you solve the Zerg problem? Well, by definition, the Zerg problem gets solved through skill.
Play better, do stuff like ambush.
Okay, so
Focus
I
fire.
made Cash and JB let me ask an econ question. So here it comes.
Econ.
If everything that I have read is true, stating that auction houses, markets, player stalls are all exclusively economic node buildings, then what does trade look like in the other three node
I
types?
don't think player stalls are exclusively
Okay,
economic.
so
'cause you can have
first we have
player
to
businesses in other
vet the
towns.
supposition. Not all nodes are absent of markets. All nodes by default have a market building.
See, yeah.
Auction houses, as you described, are present within the
Those are economic buildings.
economic nodes. So that is a true distinction. However, the market buildings do provide player stalls. So those are also not delegated just to economic nodes. Within the vicinity of the market, and depending on the upgrades you choose and the level of your node, you will have additional stalls that are available. So players can utilize those in non-economic nodes. In addition, you can also use player shops, which require certificates in order to use. But once you have a certificate, you can then place your player shop within the vicinity of a node's market, any node's market. So
Okay, that's
basically what that
interesting.
means is you will take that certificate and your character will sit down in place and they will spawn a UI billboard above them where you get to make a brief advertisement of what your shop is. And any player can come up to you and they can interact with your character and see your shop that you have listed goods for and make purchases as if you were a vendor from your shop. So that's the difference between
It's like
player
the
stalls
bazaar system
and
in EverQuest.
the player shop system.
You essentially turn
The
yourself
benefit
into a
that economic
vendor
nodes,
NPC.
markets have over non-economic node markets is that their player shop certificates, when sold from a Metropolis economic node, I believe, can be placed anywhere in the world, independent of market proximity. So you could be at a dungeon and set up your player shop there. And it's like, hey, you want to buy some health pots? You can grab your health pots, and you could, set
So
up
that's
there.
new.
So yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. That actually answers quite a bit.
Huh.
Okay, sorry, my mind just got blown. So sorry. Okay. This is actually a question from my community. It's actually a pretty straightforward question. What do node types look like in this current iteration of the build? And will all node types be available to test at the start of Alpha 2?
No, not all node types will be available to test at the start of
Ooh.
Alpha 2. I can say that definitively. Currently, the state of nodes is scientific, is our academic or scientific.
Yeah, that's all there was in
what
Alpha
we'll
1.
call, nodes, and that is an election method, right? That is the voting method. We have not yet stood up the other node types, and it is likely that at the entrance of Alpha 2, we will be only using the election method for node mayorship. Again, Alpha 2, however, is intended to have additional updates as we continue through Alpha 2, right? And
So
those
he's
will be
saying
relatively
nodes
frequent,
and
as we
mayor
test
stuff will
things
be
that are
in,
currently
but
getting developed and
all just
implemented,
general
we'll put
election
them into Alpha 2
until
for
an update
players
later
to
on.
test. In short order, a lot of that will be node type stuff, right? Because that's on our critical path of priority when it comes to development, is standing up the node services and the node mechanisms. But for currently testing what we need to test with regards to player government, the interaction of the player government with the build systems, the policies, everything that goes into managing a node, we're servicing that through the academic scientific node type.
And just to, I guess, follow up a little bit. So
Yeah.
does that mean that other nodes that are like military, because again, they're all hard coded, right? So
True.
are those offline? Like
No,
start
it
of Alpha
means
2?
that currently they are designated as
Yeah, everything is
scientific
just
or
coded as
academic.
a scientific node right
Oh,
now.
they'll all be scientific.
Correct. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't be testing certain features before implementing the additional node types that relate to a militaristic node or a divine node, such as through our narrative systems. We will likely be testing and reflecting different cultural aspects of the node type through commissions that are available, through the different narrative types that are available, that will be military, divine, and economic. But when it comes to the government systems, that will be scientific to start.
So it's kind of like a generalized node with the scientific election process where they're going to
So
test
we've
stuff
learned
from
that
different
the raid
things.
difficulty adapts dynamically based off of player performance and group composition, and that the dynamic adaptation raises questions about the implementation of the adapted scaling during raids, especially where there's PvP involved. Could you explain if there are mechanisms, particularly during boss fights, that protect players from PvP interactions such as room locks, or are all raids intended to remain fully open to PvP?
Yeah. So as I said when we were talking about the dungeons earlier with Nice, that some dungeons do have instancing. Some boss rooms are instanced. In those locations, yes, they will be serviced either through a room lock or some other mechanism that protects the engagement, the environment of that encounter to who is intended to be there. But the majority of our encounters can be interrupted, right? They are open world. And in those events where
So there will be
two
some
groups that are coming
instanced
together
or
that might be
protected
at
raid
war with
bosses.
one another, where open flagging is not necessary, they are just flagged combatants with one another. They're going to have to manage the battlefield between what they're achieving in the PvE encounter, right, versus now what they're experiencing in the dynamic player versus player encounter. And some of the effects that we have, which allow the victors of those engagements to continue forward with the PvE experience, is are things like stat dampening through the death debuff. And the death debuff, when activated multiple times for the losing party, will continue to stack, and it will gain time until eventually their ability to interrupt you is now essentially decimated through these stacks of debuffs.
So he's saying if people are trying to PK you and take your raid boss, kill them so many times that they can't fight back anymore.
And that's kind of how we intend to service. Okay, let's let a person prevail.
I just follow up real quick. So is the dynamic adaptation only in those instance ones, or is that meant to also be in the open world PvP?
You're talking about the dynamic AI?
Yeah.
Yeah, the encounter, so the encounter design is dynamic regardless of if it's instanced or not.
Okay.
And the reason for that dynamicism, first of all, there's a couple of approaches to the dynamicism there. one is how does the state tree of the NPC respond to the actions of the players? Well, it weights certain actions and behaviors based off of what the players are doing. And as it weights those things, it makes decisions that will be unique according to the encounter that's occurring in front of it. So each time might be different as a result of that. That's one section. In addition, when we talk about the adaptive scaling, this isn't scaling in like power relation to the level of the player. This is scaling in the quantity of participants, right? And that means that it starts to weight the behaviors that include AoE actions higher than others as a result of the number of players who are present.
Yeah.
This intrinsically increases the challenge rating of the encounter.
So
because
if
those
the
AoE
boss's
abilities are
heat map or
providing
whatever
a
it's using to
higher
detect the
return on
players
DPS
sees that
overall to
a
the
lot of players are all grouped up in one spot, it might target those areas,
Thanks.
use more large AoEs.
I'm gonna piggyback off of Jamie's amazing question and kind of stick with dungeons to a certain extent. Risk versus reward seems to be involved in all systems. Do you feel risk, such as death penalties or the threat of being PK'd during dungeon content, will lead to players zerging world bosses and dungeons to minimize said risk, thus trivializing some content and experiences regardless of that planned difficulty scaling
I
you just
see.
spoke about?
Well,
Well, we already know they're going to cut back the
another
XP
part
if
of
you
our
do that.
design that is more old school, but speaks exactly to this thought, is that the reward is finite. And what that means is, in a lot of modern MMOs, each person gets their own reward for participating.
Yeah, no personal loot off the boss.
And back in the day,
It drops,
the
X number of items, and you got to split
one
it.
person was the loot master. They would
between
interact
whoever
with the
comes,
raid
so.
boss, and then there would be some guild-driven system or alliance-driven system that would determine who's next on the list to get this bow, or who's the
DKP is what he's
crafter
talking
that
about.
deserves this master legendary recipe, or where does this legendary material go, right? It's not that, oh, everybody got your loot box because we all completed the boss together. Everyone gets the auto-granted reward from the quest of completing the boss together, right?
Yeah, so bring 5 people, you have a 1 in 5 chance to get the drop. Bring 100, you got a 1 in 100 chance.
Organized the raid to go defeat the dragon was because the dragon bow dropped and there was only one that dropped, right? So the more people you take, the more slices of the finite pie you have to deliver, which reduces the reward structure. So if you're going to reduce risk, you must reduce reward.
Dude, that's so good.
Love that. I love that.
That's so good.
Well, that sounds like fun. You just end the podcast right there, I think.
The mic drop moment.
I know, right? Okay, so we're gonna switch gears here just a little bit. We all know that the freeholds will be difficult to attain, but one of the alternative ways that we've heard of is to experience the freeholds is the guild freehold. Is there anything that you can tell us about the guild freehold system?
Yes, I can tell you some things about the guild freehold system. So one thing that we've been discussing on the design side, some things that I've been thinking about with regards to what differentiates a guild freehold from a freehold, right? A guild freehold is not just a finite piece of space like
He's talking about the guild halls on the freehold system.
There are going to be likely expandable plots that are available around the guild freehold where members of the guild can have access to themselves that are administered by the guild master or whoever he designates to administer it. He or she designates to administer it. Where players can lay down an additional small plot of land to do farming on, to potentially do livestock raising, or to make the other freehold endeavors. So the guild hall is central to those additional plots around it, of which will be finite that the guild will determine who gets.
Very cool. One quick
That's
follow-up
new
on
info.
this. If you have a guild hall, can you still have a tavern?
If you have a guild hall, yes, you can still have a tavern. Those are separate systems. So the tavern system is administered by the node, and the node essentially gives out these business permits that are limited in supply, that tavern owners then can use to customize the vendor tables with things that they create for players to interact with within the tavern hall and other types of services.
Very cool. Thank you.
You can also have a tavern or
All
another
right.
business on your
Steven, just to
freehold.
preface, you've been teasing Rogue for over a year.
Oh boy.
And so this next question is about the Rogue. So will we see anything regarding the Rogue prior to Alpha 2? And more specifically, how will the Rogue stealth mechanic work?
He's
in
just going for
comparison
it
to
with this one, huh?
camouflage, or has that really been solidified? Can you tell us anything new about the Rogue?
So rogues do have true stealth.
Uh-oh.
Which means that unlike camouflage, where proximity matters in identifying the target, truth stealth is not proximity dependent. So that is something that differentiates obviously camouflage from the rogue stealth ability. I can give some unfortunate news that the
Ooh.
rogue will likely not be available at the start of Alpha 2.
Really?
I know.
Bard will, but not
We are
Rogue?
choosing instead, this is a recent decision, to focus more on expanding the existing archetypes, fleshed out active abilities and passive abilities, and we will be saving the Rogue for the first update after the initial launch of Alpha 2.
Huh.
So it's just not going to quite make it for launch, but it is something that we will very quickly be standing up as it is a key part of the archetype testing and Alpha 2. But yes, that is
Can just
that's the
a
plan.
quick follow-up then. Can you give us the list of the Alpha 2 classes?
Here we go. Yeah.
just a quick follow-up. Yes, so the classes for sure at this point are going to be tank, ranger, fighter, mage, bard, and
Cleric.
did I say ranger?
Yeah, you did.
Wait, hold on here.
You didn't say cleric.
So summoner?
No rogue, no summoner.
Summoner
for
and
me.
Rogue will be missing at the launch of Alpha 2.
That's correct. Yes, and both of
Ah.
those will be the first update right after the launch of Alpha 2.
Thank you,
Okay,
Steven.
well, not too long to wait on either then. That's good.
Well, that was
Cleric,
great.
that's what I was missing. Cleric,
Yeah.
thank you. It
There's
was
no
cleric.
healers in Alpha 2.
No,
Yeah, no
there's a
healers.
cleric, there's
Oh
a
my
cleric,
God.
There's
there's a cleric
bards.
too,
Just thought
yes,
there's
thank
no
you.
healers.
I thought I named 5. I'm like, wait a minute, there's 6.
I want to shout out a community member. It was Sonic Explosion who brought this.
Well,
to my
that's good then,
attention.
because we know that we didn't know how long the
says a
summer was
bit
going
of
to
a
take to get
longer
in, but now
preface,
it's just the
and I'll
first
get to the
update.
question, but Grandmaster crafting stations are vital resources located within specific node tiers with access limited to node citizens. This setup implies that crafters might be bound to the Grandmaster stations of their home node, potentially restricting their crafting capabilities to specific types. Could you provide insight on the flexibility of the crafting system, specifically whether or not crafters can utilize Grandmaster stations outside of their home node, or if they are confined to the stations within their own node?
So,
It's a very convoluted question.
crafters can use stations at any node. That's important to note, right? The difficulty is transiting the materials you need to the node where
And
the crafting
finding a node that
station
has the
exists,
station you want.
because the materials must be present there at that node. But the crafter can go to any node and craft at a crafting station. The benefits of being a citizen at the node that has the crafting station are significantly reduced fees to the point nearly of nothing, and additional benefits and access to um, uh, unique enhancements to the craft if you're a citizen, right? Like depending if there's a relic available that grants the unique enhancement or something along those lines. So to answer that question, Grandmaster crafters can go anywhere in the world and craft at a Grandmaster
Okay.
crafting station. Yeah.
All right, cool.
All right. What is the current full list of weapons planned, and could we have an update on how dual wielding will work, such as weapon options and relative weapon trees?
So
His questions are all like 6 parts.
another twofer question.
I don't know what you're talking about, Stephen. I
Guys are
don't know.
cheaters.
I'm
It's just
seeing
a one-off
I'm
sentence.
seeing a trend here. Nice. I'm seeing a trend. Okay.
It's a single question. It's just bad grammar
a
with the
list
run-on.
of our intended
No big deal.
weapon groups at the launch of Alpha 2 are one-handed maces, one-handed swords, wands, spell books, longbow, short bow, two-handed swords, two-handed spears, and dual-wielded daggers.
Dual wielded daggers. And so for the follow up to that, with the dual wielding portion, so are daggers? Can we infer that daggers are the only dual wield weapon?
And by
in
the way,
that sense?
just real quick, there may be other weapon types that are present as well, but these are the groups that will have their weapon skill tree fleshed out. So,
Okay.
and those other types of weapons that are present, like model form, will likely be categorized into one of these groups so that they have skill tree progression until they get updated with their actual skill tree progression.
So he's saying like probably a great axe or something
what
would be
was the second
classified as a sword for testing
How
purposes.
would dual wielding work? And so can we infer that
Yeah, dual
are
wield
daggers
daggers.
going to be the only dual wielding weapon?
Even without the rogues,
or
No,
can
I
we
guess
do
fighter could do
one-handed
it.
sword,
you'll
one-handed
be able
mace?
to do you'll be able to do one-handed maces, one-handed swords, two one-handed swords. There's a number of different mixes and matches. They will all use the same dual weapon progression tree. So that's an important distinction.
So the weapon skill
That's,
tree is just dual wield.
however,
It doesn't matter which one
the
you're
way we're
holding.
servicing dual weapons is that they will occupy your main hand offhand, and you will have a specific recipe which includes the previously completed one-handed weapons that are intending to be dueled.
Lovely. And one thing I'm seeing a lot of people in chat ask about: will shields have their own weapon tree?
Shields will have shields will have a weapon tree as well. Oh no, wait, no. Do shields have weapon tree? No, shields do not have weapon tree because they're an offhand. I'm sorry. Shields do not have a weapon tree. They're an offhand. There will be passives within archetype trees that grant towards shield usage. So some archetypes will have passives that benefit that. In addition, there will be a universal skill progression. The universal skill progression tree will have shield progression within it for the block action. So there are two places where
Okay, that kind of makes sense.
speccing in skill
So your
progression
offhands don't have a
will
weapon tree. It's
beneficial
just whatever's in your
usage.
main hand, unless you're dual wielding, and then it's
Okay,
a
I'm done
dual
with my 10
wield tree.
questions.
That's 5 times 2. Nice. You cheater. Okay, well, I think this is the last question here, and we're going to end it on a lore question. I was warned not to ask you lore questions, and we totally ignored that. So here we go. What is the average person on Vera's experience with the essence? Is everybody using the essence in the same way, or is this something that's more like a rare gift that us as journeyman heroes have some sort of innate ability to tap into?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So essence, the relationship of essence with the
So can Bob the janitor use magic is his question.
is that certain people within this world have a greater ability to focus essence into stronger effects, aka magic, right? And generally among the player population, you are all stronger wielders of essence as a whole and capable of achieving great things with it. While everyone has some attunement with essence because each has a mortal coil amongst the divine races, not all of them excel in its use or study, right? And so those more commoner people that you might see in the NPCs and narrative and dialogue and whatnot, many of them are not going to be as adept with the use of essence. It doesn't mean that they couldn't be if they tried. It means that they are not adept at using it. But you'll also see certain characters that are NPC, non-player characters, um, that are above and beyond any player character's ability to use it, right? So the idea is that essence flows through this plane, it flows through this universe, and the divine races have a unique relationship with essence, when it comes to wielding it, and oftentimes that's the interest of the darker forces, uh, uh, in manipulating.
So he's saying in the lore you can either learn to get better at magic or you can have
Very
any
cool.
gift
Thank
with
you
it.
for answering lore questions. That's cool.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I got to tell you, this was a great AMA. I really enjoyed it. This is a lot of fun, and I see the comments in the community. They enjoyed it as well. Like people are saying, best AMA ever. I
Oh,
thought
thank
it
God.
was, yeah, I
Yes,
thought it was
seriously.
great. I thought you guys did a great job. I think asking some questions.
That's a pretty low
was really
bar
interested.
if you think this
And,
is the
and
best AMA
both
ever.
questions that got some depth in them for people who've been following the project for a while, and
I thought it was
questions
good,
like
though.
our lore, which gives even newcomers
We
some
actually learned some
idea
new
of the
stuff.
setting that they'll be venturing into. So let me thank you guys for joining. Vladis, Jamie, Chaos, Nice, Sunny, you all did a great job today. I love what you guys do for the community. Obviously, content creation is a very important part of the relationship between
So there is no
development
official like
and the
people who've been
community, right? You are
gotten into
sort of
the
bridge,
content creator
that
program,
that
but you can kind of guess that these
services
guys are going
the
to.
ride between people who are watching 24/7 and people who just want to see an update, short update. And I think you guys do great jobs in creating the content you create. And I know I speak for the community when I say thank you for that. Please let me get each of you to kind of plug your places. Nice, we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you. Nice Gaming on Twitch and YouTube. We do Ashes of Creation live stream every Tuesday. The Voices of Vera, myself, and Is There No One Else? Really appreciate this community. Thank you for letting us be a part of this. Really appreciate the opportunity, and I'll keep it short there.
Love it. Sunny?
Yes, thank you very much on behalf of JB and Cash for letting us share the stage with such excellent and admirable hobbits. Lore Forged is a podcast that talks about the game Ashes of Creation, but also the lore behind it. And you can find all of our stuff, Twitch, YouTube, and Discord links for our Discord community over at loreforged.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vladis, how about you, buddy?
You can find me on Vladis Gaming on YouTube, Vladis Gaming on Twitch. I also do the 1v1 podcast, which hopefully our boy Steven Sharif will be on episode 100. So looking forward to that one. Yeah,
That's good.
super exciting stuff.
Oh my God!
I didn't mean to kill you,
Oh, yeah.
Steven.
You're gonna kill me.
Nope.
Unbelievable. No. Oh, Margaret's so funny. Jamie.
They didn't hear me,
how
but
about
I
you,
said
buddy?
never invited again. Now you guys heard me.
Yeah, you can find me at Jamie Chaos on all the different social platforms and over on Twitch. I do a show on 8:30 p.m. Eastern with Annie Lace called Tangents Creation. Based off the name, we go off of lots of different tangents while we try to attempt to cover a lot of Ashes stuff, but it doesn't always go that way. You can also find any of the we also make YouTube videos and stuff. So if you type in Tangents of Creation in YouTube, you'll find us there. I think it's at Tangents Creation. So you find us there. And yeah, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you guys so much for having us. It's been great.
Loved having each of you, and I just want to give a special shout out to the Ashes of Creation community team. Margaret, Rye, Cody, all of the mods. You guys do an awesome job in helping us to facilitate this. Obviously, I think you are the shining light of what excellence looks like in this industry from a community team. So amazing job. Well, with that being said, I really enjoyed it. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you to the community for tuning in. And we will see you all next time. Bye.
I thought that was pretty good. So we learned some interesting stuff. We learned that I have channel points here that I didn't claim the entire time. Cool. Yeah. I thought it was good. Got answer a couple of questions. Some kind of fluffier ones, but we sort of expected that. What did you guys think was the best piece of info that we got? Oh, you're talking about how they have true stealth, and yeah, that does sound appealing. Yeah, I mean, at least you won't have to worry about playing it right at the start. You can wait for the first update. Well, I guess you'll have Summoner to play for the first update. True. Yeah, I mean, Ranger's already got camouflage of some kind, but can you make it better with rogue augments? Probably. Turn their temporary camouflages into, like, true stealth. Definite possibilities. We know we got six archetypes for a start, and confirm that the bard's going to be there, which I think we are going to see for the June live stream. So I'm pretty sure this month is going to be Node Wars, and then I believe the one after that is going to be the Bard. I was kind of hoping one of them was going to ask when we're going to get the character creator, but I like the idea about the guild freehold or guild hall having some plots that you can use for at least having some access to materials. Makes it so if you have one of those, then you can sort of use that area for funneling guild supplies instead of having to have people give up use of their individual freeholds for long periods of time. Welcome, welcome, whoever just joined. We're just kind of wrapping up and talking about what we liked best about the stream. Looking forward to hunting people who are taking resources the wrong way. Yeah, I'm not sure how I felt about his answer for that. It's like some random new player doesn't know what he's doing and is like stealing your trees and doing damage to the land management system, and his answer is like, oh yeah, well, go kill their entire guild. What if it's a bot? What do I do then? I like that idea of like being able to turn a certain area around the node into a purple zone, so if like bots or something are stealing your resources, you can just kill them without having to worry about it. That's why I think if I was ever going to run a node, I'd have to have like some way of making it so that people who kill bots have a safe way to get their corruption worked off. Because obviously I would lean toward a node that had like bounty hunters and stuff. Maybe that's some way to do it in the bounty hunter skill tree, make it so you don't get corruption from killing within a certain distance of your node. Kind of goes along the same lines as the purple area, but bots, yeah, I hope people actively report them. I plan to. Like, just take video clips and like send it and like report it to. Hopefully they have active GMs. They're supposed to. Yeah, I mean, one of the good things at least is that they're not going to be as efficient as regular players, right? Because you got to have a bot who then farms. You're not just farming gold; you have to farm glint and then convert it into gold. So they're going to be earning it at like a magnitude lower than people who actually go farm, get the glint, and take it on a caravan, and upgrade the efficiency of the turn-in. So that helps. But I do hope they're aggressively tracking and banning. It seems like they have some pretty in-depth heat map software to kind of figure out like where this gold is coming from, if there's large changes in the economy. And he talked about it on one of his prior streams a long while ago. I think when he was talking to Asmongold, like a year ago maybe. He talked about like heat mapping, and they can track like what account a large amount of gold came from and who else they've interacted with, and some CIA shit. But if it gets bots out of the game, then because a game like this where the economy is super important, you don't want people ruining it with bots. It's Hey, thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Welcome, welcome. Hoping to do more Ashes content as we get closer into Alpha 2. Kind of working on some Final Fantasy and Guild Wars stuff right now, so I have something to play while I'm waiting to get back into the game. Thankfully not too much longer. The point of not turning purple, have they addressed that in the past? I mean, it's something they thought about, and a lot of people have like suggested, like putting in like a mayoral policy or something that like converts the area around your node into a purple zone, so that anyone gathering around your node is automatically a combatant, so you can kill them without getting corruption. That's what people are talking about. But it sounds like it's not something they're planning to do right now. Ostensibly, the question was about how do I deal with bots and other people stealing our resources because of how important this land management system seems to be. Like, can they do essentially ecological warfare espionage by cutting down the entire forest around your node while you're asleep, and then you have to get corruption to kill them? So people are looking for ways to like actually defend their node, which I think is the right question to ask. We'll have to see what kind of answers they come up with. Once they get more data about it in Alpha 2, they can at least start to see how big of a problem it is, or maybe it isn't. Because there's the whole like practicality aspect of it, right? So even if you go to somebody else's node and start gathering all the resources, well, you still got to walk all the way back to your node. And you have a limited carrying capacity, so realistically you have to either take a mule all the way back or set up a caravan and run it all the way back. So maybe it's just so impractical that people don't do it as much as we think they're going to. The issue's more with like bots or alt accounts that people don't care about doing it just to do damage to the ecosystem. Welcome everybody. We're just sort of wrapping up and discussing what we liked most about the stream, or what new info we think was the most enticing. Personally, I like the fact that Bard is confirmed. This is one of my front runner classes. Archetypes, sorry. Kind of interesting. He talked about how it does sound like they will actually be a pretty solid healer. Yeah, exactly. Especially if you go secondary cleric. At least maybe enough to keep your group alive if the cleric dies for a short period of time, maybe. Or maybe they can do some of the group healing and regen to keep some of the clerics focus on the main tank during raids. Maybe some group shields. I mean, we'll have to see how it kind of plays out when we see their skills, hopefully next month. I'm not too torn up about not having the rogue at the beginning, to be honest. It's not really high on my list, though. I will try it out. I'm going to try out everything. And we kind of knew the summoner wasn't going to be ready. Though clearly they've started work on it, since those Minotaur mobs are essentially summoners, so they have some kind of, at least the coding for summoning pets somewhere in there. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. It was a good stream. Nice, fairly concise, and we got some new information to go over. Thank you all for coming out. And I will be streaming tomorrow night, probably. Either Final Fantasy or Guild Wars 2. Just while we wait on more Ashes stuff, and go from there. I might try to stream depending on what day it is. I have an exam for work, and this is going to get kind of close to it, but I assume it's going to be before Memorial Day weekend, so I may try to stream the next live stream like this, if I can. Normally they happen while I'm at work, but might be able to do the May one. So I'll let you guys know if that's the case. I'll put it on my schedule. Well, my chat window's in the way of everything. Okay, well, thank you all again. Have a wonderful